throughout the book, the theme of geopolitics just it comes up again and again and again. And you really could look to any part of the world and see how it's influencing. We haven't mentioned your experience in India, which is a very personal one for you, and quite a tragic one as well. But what about in the South China Sea? I thought your paragraph or two on the South China Sea was really insightful. So if you could explain a little bit of the geopolitics of sand in the South China Sea, I would really appreciate that.
Sure. No, that's a really important issue. So in a nutshell, what's happening is in the South China Sea is this very important strategic region. It sits like at this very important maritime crossroads. Something like half of all the world's shipping passes through there, right? It's this area that's sort of near off the coast of China, Vietnam, Philippines. It's the sort of area right in between all these countries. And they've all been sparring of it, right? All these half a dozen countries have been, saying, oh, it's mine for decades. And it's very important to the rest of the world that it actually just stay open. So there are a few tiny little islands, really like coral reefs, basically, poking up in this ocean, and all the countries have been squabbling over them for years. Well, about 5 years ago, China has been building up its dredging fleet. Right, it has hundreds of ships, probably by now more than any other country in the world, for dredging up sand from the bottom of the ocean. And they sent this dredging fleet to work, just sent them out there to build giant artificial islands on top of these coral reefs. They just pulled up millions and millions of tons of sand from the bottom of the ocean, dumped it right on top of these coral reefs, built artificial islands, built landing strips and military barracks on these islands, and occupied them. So, in effect, China went and just created themselves these military bases smack in the middle of this heavily disputed waterway. Which, first of all, was a massive environmental blow. They just annihilated huge swaths of coral reef, and also it's a real flashpoint because the United States is committed publicly and has said many times we are committed to maintaining freedom of navigation. Right, we don't want any country to be able to block shipping through this waterway, and China is in effect saying, you know what, if push comes to shove, we'll decide who gets to go through this waterway. So there's been this kind of, the last few years, we've had this kind of a game of chicken between them where the U.S. will send Navy ships through there every now and then just to sort of prove a point. And China will send Navy ships out towards them to kind of harass them. And a year or two ago, they almost collided. There was almost like an at-sea, like major collision between two of these ships. Luckily, it didn't happen, but that kind of thing could happen at any time. And basically, it's this real standoff, which could escalate at any time.
And how much do you suspect that the role of sand specifically is going to play in the future of the South China Sea? Do you think more of the same is going to happening? More extraction to build artificial islands to, claim sovereignty to then build whatever fleet of ships you might have there and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're still doing it. They're still adding to that little group of islands. And there's another similar group of islands in the north of the China Sea that they're also building up. And that's probably the most extreme example of how countries are using sand to literally expand their nations. There's all kinds of...
That's a really cool part, yeah.
Yeah, land reclamation, which basically means building artificial land where there was none before, which is usually just sand. You send out barges, you pile up enormous amounts of sand right on your coast, and all of a sudden, boom, you've got extra real estate. So far, mostly, with the exception of the South China Sea, that's mostly just been, to create more real estate that's, you can sell as beachfronts and you can develop it and so on. But inevitably, sooner or later, somebody's going to encroach on their neighbors on a neighboring country's land This has already come close to happening with Singapore was building up more and more land and starting to muscle in on what Malaysia considered their territory. So I do expect we'll see more of that kind of thing.
And another point to re-emphasize there is the damage to the ecosystem of the South China Sea, because similarly as the rivers we mentioned earlier, I mean, the physical reshaping of this area, which is one of the most fertile fish areas as well, which millions of people that live on the coasts of, like you said, Vietnam, even Taiwan, even the Philippines would rely on these fishing populations for their living, are having that ecosystem essentially decimated, more or less. So many more instances of sand influencing geopolitics, but I just thought that one was a particularly interesting one since, as you said, it could almost be the flashpoint of whatever the giant sort of Thucydides trap complex is going to be between China and the US eventually.